reading today from Hebrews 11:39 to 42, the NRSV version. Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, without us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. And God always blesses the public reading of his inspired and infallible word. Thank you.
We're leaving Hebrews 11. I just want to take a note to acknowledge that we have spent a lot of time in Hebrews 11. If you are here for the first time, we've been journeying through Hebrews for nearly a year now, and we are now at part 42 of our study as we consider the example of Jesus. And in this story, this letter, in fact, some commentators call Hebrews a sermon. We are coming to a section where the writer is taking our attention away from the hall of faith that he has been given us examples of, all the way back when he started talking about Abraham, and then he's talked about Isaac and about Jacob and about Joseph and about so many others. We've traveled through every single one of those characters together over a series of months, and we get to verse 39, where he is turning our attention away from all of those people that we have seen to look toward Jesus. Because the truth is, we run the long road of faith. We race in this race of faith together with the family of God across the ages by fixing our eyes on one person and one person alone. The others may inspire us, but we do not look at them. We do not look to them. We might have looked at them, but they do not hold our gaze. The writer is very clear that we look to Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. By this stage in this journey, we are deep into the message that the writer of Hebrews wants us to understand. If this was a preached sermon that was then sent to a tired church, then it was done so to call them to endure by seeing Jesus more clearly. Not by considering him simply intellectually, but by seeing him. By realizing that as we fix our eyes on him, something changes in us. Most biblical scholars agree that Hebrews is not a casual letter. It is a carefully crafted pastoral message, however it is delivered, designed to steady shaking believers by exalting Christ above every other idea, above every other thing. The section that you're looking at with me today, from verse 39 of chapter 11 through to verse 2 of chapter 12, is a hinge. It's the center of a seesaw, if you like, the fulcrum, the pivot point in this section of Hebrews, where the writer's turning our attention away from the hall of faith, which is all of chapter 11, and towards Jesus, which is all of chapter 12. And it gathers the faithful of yesterday, all those people that we have already looked at, The runners of today, that's you and me. And it reminds us that we are to run toward the finish line in one breathtaking vista. Now, I have done this before, maybe a year ago with you, but I want you to remember that the one single idea at the center of the letter to Hebrews is Jesus is better. That's the single idea that has worked out in lots of different environments. He's better than the temple. He's better than the tabernacle. He's better than the old covenant. Remember, we've looked at all of this, but you may have forgotten. He's better than Moses. He's better than the Sabbath. He's better than the sacrificial system. He is better than everything. He's better than the prophets. Remember how Hebrews begins? All those months ago, back in Hebrews chapter 11, I learnt it in the authorized version of the Bible. God, who at sundry times and in times past hath spoken unto us through the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us through his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and by whom he made the worlds, being the brightness of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, when he had sat down at the right hand of God, said unto him, and then on it goes. That one single idea that Jesus is better undergirds everything that this writer, this pastor, this person has to say to this struggling church. Jesus is better. That means Jesus is stronger. It means Jesus is closer. It means Jesus is more faithful. It means Jesus is more reliable. And the way he writes this letter, you will not pick it up in English, but it's as if he is climbing a mountain. So the sentence structure from chapter 1 all the way through to chapter 11 is pretty steady, but the sentences are slowly getting shorter. As if he's taking us on a journey up a hill until you get to Hebrews 11. And at the beginning of Hebrews 11, the sentence structure starts to get shorter. And if you read it carefully, you feel as if this writer is running out of time. I don't think they are running out of time. They might have been writing it from a place where they were running out of time. But I think they're quite deliberate about the structure in Hebrews 11. Because having got us to the top of this mountain, they start with this long list of people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, etc., etc. And it's as if we've made it to the top of the mountain and we're starting to run down the other side. And the sentence structure gets faster, shorter, almost as if our journey's getting faster. Don't forget Samuel and Jephthah, and don't forget, and remember this person and this person and this person and this person and the prophets. It's getting faster and faster and faster. And then there is a sudden break in that speed at the end of chapter 11, beginning of chapter 12. Right where we are is where the sentence structure breaks and the sentences feel longer again. And he says, therefore being surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. That's the point at which the structure changes in the sentences. The author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its ignominy. It's as if he wants us to travel up the side of the mountain with him to Hebrews 11, and then to run down the other side. And as we run down the other side, we hear all of these stories. And then the languages of running into a stadium, we'll get to it in a minute. And when you run into the stadium, it is full of the saints. It's full of all the men and the women who have gone before us. But the writer doesn't position them as people who are ambivalent or neutral in your race. They are cheering you on. As you run into the stadium, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Sarah, they're all there saying, "Come on, Lilies. Come on, Scott." And in the distance in the stadium, you see the finish line. And they're saying, "You can make it. Come on, don't stop now. Don't give up now." But he writes it in such a way as he says, even though you can hear all their voices, the cloud of witnesses, they are not who catch your gaze. You look at Jesus, and he is waiting for you to cross the finish line. So these inspire, but he's the one that you're running to. He's the one that you can see. He's the one that you keep your eyes fixed on. And I want to unpack how he does that in this section of the letter. He describes to us the cloud that we stand amongst in verses 39 of chapter 11 through to the beginning of chapter 12, verse 1. He helps us to understand the race that we are called to run in the second half of chapter 12, verse 1, to be posh, 1b. And then he presents the Christ that we are called to see in chapter 12, verse 2. The cloud we stand amongst, the race we are called to run, and the Christ that we are called to see. Let's take them one at a time. Look at 11:39 to 12:1a. All these, though commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, stop. Commended yet not receiving. Do you notice that at the end of chapter 11, verse 39 and 40? Commended yet not receiving. The heroes of the faith that we have spent months looking at were commended by God, but they did not receive the fullness of the promise in their lifetime. Whoever wrote Hebrews says God's design was that they and we should be made perfect together. I just want to pause and reflect on that with you for a moment, because there are those Christians that will take you in a particular direction around that, and they are Christians who believe in a doctrine that is commonly called soul sleep. And what they teach is this, that when you die, you exit time, and your spirit and your body remain in the earth where you're buried until Christ returns. Now, the best version of that belief, I don't share it, I'll explain to you why in a moment, is that as you exit time, it's not that you have some kind of awareness of your waiting, but instead you die, and the next thing you know is you're being resurrected with Christ. And that is the moment of your consummation, or your being made perfect, as this passage describes. So they would teach that when you die, you are buried, or whatever happens to your body, the next moment in your awareness is Christ's return. I don't believe that that's what the Bible teaches. And I want to explain what I do believe, and then explain how I think this works. Here's the traditional teaching of the church on this issue. When Paul wrote to the church in Philippi, he said, I am in a dilemma between two situations, whether to remain with you or to go, and the language is immediately, and be with Christ, which is far better. But for the sake of you, I will remain amongst you. Anytime Paul writes about what happens after death, he gives the impression that the moment we die, something happens to our spirit, our soul, the essence of who we are, and it is united with Christ. It is in the presence of Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15 seems to indicate the same thing. So the traditional view of the church, which is the one that I hold, is that when we die, we are immediately united with Christ in our spirit, and our bodies remain in the ground. We leave aside or are cremated, whatever way our bodies are dealt with. We leave aside the physical part of who we are, and we are united immediately with Christ. I believe that that's what the Bible teaches very clearly, that there is no gap, and actually that when we die, we immediately go to be with him. There is no space. A man that I knew very well and loved very deeply called Dallas Willard was dying of pancreatic cancer. And he was interviewed by another guy who said to him, Dallas, are you afraid of dying? And Dallas Willard said, I am not afraid of dying. And the interviewer, a man called John Ortberg, said to him, to you, what is dying like? And he said, well, I don't know because I haven't done it yet. And he said, but I would suggest to you that dying for the believer is not even an interruption. And John Ortberg said, I don't know what you mean. And Dallas Willard said this to him, John, I believe I will be dead for some time before I realize it. In other words, he understood that what the New Testament taught about life after death, and maybe I'll do a series with you about life after death, because we are confused about this in the evangelical church. What is heaven? What is it like? What happens to us when we die? Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. We will talk about it at some point. I can't wait to explain to you in about 20 minutes when we'll talk about some of this. Dallas Willard said that because Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly, and because the Bible repeatedly points to this idea, and I know it sounds like a dichotomy or confusing, but I want to explain it to you. But the Bible teaches that true believers don't die in the fullest sense of the word. When Jesus speaks in John 11 to Mary and Martha about the death of their brother Lazarus, in verse 25, he says to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Listen to the next bit. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And he who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And Martha replies in verse 26, I believe you are the Messiah. I believe you. So he asks her a personal question, and she replies with a theological answer. He's not asking her a theological question, not just a theological question. He's asking her, what do you believe happens when you die, Martha? And she answers with what she has been taught about what happens to people when they die. And he requires her to make the journey in her head, are you with me so far? From what she assents to what she believes. He knows that she understands the words that describe life after death. He wants the words that she understands to become a hope that will sustain her in the face of her brother's death. And he says, death doesn't get the last word, Martha. Even though Lazarus has stopped breathing, he is not dead in the way that you understand it. That is what Hebrews is trying to get us to think about. And the writer will begin to open that up in chapter 12, particularly from verse 25 onwards, which we will get to in a few weeks, where he starts to talk about the difference between what the old covenant brought people to, a mountain that was filled with smoke and fire and shook, and what new believers in the new covenant come to, which is Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the festal gathering of angels gathered together in worship to God, to the assembly of the firstborn. These words just tumble out of this writer's mouth, one after another. And he wants them to understand something about how their lives will end. He wants them to understand that if they die, they will immediately be with Christ. He's saying that to them because they're being persecuted. Remember why the letter's being written. It's not just a jumble of theological ideas set out on a piece of paper. It is a letter sent to people to say, even if this doesn't go the way you want it to go, you will not die you will see Christ. So what then does he mean when he says here in verses 39 and 40, all these, though commended by their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. What he means by that is that we will all receive our resurrection bodies at the same moment. So when the believer dies, she immediately goes into the presence of Jesus Christ. But when the end of time comes, we will be given resurrection bodies and we will be brought into a completed state. And get this, I think this is amazing. Adam and Eva, the first created human beings, will receive their resurrected body at the same moment as you do. Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Jephthah and Samuel and all the prophets that we have been looking at and all the examples of heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11 will all receive their resurrection body at the same moment as Malcolm Duncan, the little boy from the Council Estate in Rathcoole, does. That's a theological chuckle. That is amazing. So these witnesses are the spirits of men and women gathered together, cheering us on in the presence of Jesus. And we will all be brought into God's presence finally and fully with our resurrection bodies together. Now, the clear pastoral implication of what I've just said to you is this: whatever you're going through, even if it takes your life, it can't take your victory. Even if something happens and you stop breathing on planet Earth, that is not the end of your story. And we Christians have got some faulty ideas around death. Because we weren't made for it, we don't fully understand it. A few weeks ago, one of my colleagues who had passed away, we had a Thanksgiving service for her here. Her name was Karen, and I wasn't in England to be present at it, but I wrote a commendation for it. And my wife and I described Karen in the present tense. And I deliberately did so. And then at the end of it, I said, I want to explain to you why I have written this commendation of Karen in the present tense. I have written it in the present tense because the Bible teaches me that she is more alive now than she has ever been. She is more fully herself than she has ever been. She is complete in every essence of her being now in a way that she was not when she was on planet Earth. And what we believe is that that body of hers, which was placed in the ground for burial, will be transformed. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 that our bodies are like seeds that are planted in the ground. They are perishable and they are mortal. But he says that there will be a day when the perishable will put on imperishability, and when the mortal will put on immortality. And in 1 Corinthians 15:26, he says, that is the moment when our final enemy, death, will be fully and finally defeated. And then he says in verses 57 and 58, you have to forgive me because none of this is in my notes. I wasn't going to talk to you about this at this level. I just think it's important for some reason that I explain one word in Hebrews chapter 11, that idea of us being made perfect together. I should have put it in my notes. It would have been more accurate, but I think I'm being pretty accurate. In 1 Corinthians 15, 57 and 58, Paul says that in that moment when we are resurrected with our new bodies, then we will say, death, where is thy victory? And sin, where is thy victory? It's only when death is fully and finally defeated that you and I will fully and completely understand the victory that we now have. And what God asks us to do is, as a community of faith, believe in that life after death now and let the world see it. So we pray for healing because we believe that Jesus heals. That is a symbol of his power of life over death. We pray even for resurrection because we believe that Jesus is the one that can resurrect the dead. But if he chooses not to do so, we give thanks that he is still the one who has conquered death. In other words, our theology of life after death is that we win no matter what. We are on the winning side no matter what. And sometimes God doesn't give you the thing you're asking for. It doesn't mean he hasn't got that person safe and well. It means that they are fully alive and fully themselves. And he promises us that we will be commended and come to him together. Evangelical commentators consistently hear in this unity of God's people across covenants, the old and the new, that Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of all things. What's the theme that I told you of Hebrews? Jesus is better. So here he is saying everything that is good in the old covenant points to Jesus. Everything that is good on planet Earth points to Jesus. He is better than even your definition of life. He is better than everything. Now, the language that the letter is written in, you may not pick up if you don't know Greek. But this idea of perfection, they will be made perfect toward the end of 39 and into 40, is the Greek word teleo. And the thread from there runs straight to Hebrews 12:2 that we're going to look at in a minute. So you see it says here, God has provided something better so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. In just a few words, he's going to say, looking on to Jesus, the author and perfecter. So he immediately ties this notion of our perfection into the perfect Jesus who is waiting for us. And the word teleo does not, or teleos, does not only mean the end of a thing. We have different words for the end of a thing in Greek. Something can be ended but not complete. It's not teleos. Something can be ended, but it will start again in a few hours. A night ends and a day begins. It's not teleos. Something can be ended but uncertain. Well, let's work this out when we have more time. It's not teleos. This word means ended and completed and perfected and finalized and exactly how it's supposed to be. All tied up in this one single idea. That we will finish our race like that. I don't know about you, but I am glad that I will finish my race in that way. My final breath on planet Earth, should Jesus choose not to return before I die, I will say something even though I do not use words. I will say what Jesus said on the cross. It is finished. My race is run. Nothing left out that needed to be done. Nothing missed that I was supposed to accomplish. My last breath will be a cry of final victory because of who Jesus is and what Jesus has called me or you to do. Jesus is the perfecter, the teleoites of faith. They are what he is what they have been waiting for. He is the end point of the race that they have been running. He is the focus of their destination. What they need, he has accomplished. And nothing is missing. Nothing else needs to be added. And nothing can be taken from it. Then in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, we hear of a cloud of witnesses. The cloud imagery speaks of a multitude so immense that you can't number it. It is a ginormous group of people. Think of a stadium, but the people that are in the seats are not spectators. They're not just watching us. They are bearing witness by their lives and their testimonies that the race we're running is the race we are supposed to be running. The wordplay that is used links their being borne witness to in chapter 11 to now them being witnesses to us in chapter 12. So all the way through chapter 11, we have been told to remember them, right? So they are the witnesses of something. But at the beginning of chapter 12, they're now witnesses of us. Which means that if you like, and don't misunderstand what I'm about to say, your name can be added to the bottom of the roll call of faith. So can mine. Now it isn't because scripture is complete, but the implication is that they, through their lives, were witnesses. And the minute they die, they now become witnesses of a different kind. They're here witnesses that are pointing to someone. Now they are witnesses of someone else who's seeking to live their lives to point to him. So that witness ministry still continues. And the way the writer of Hebrews writes it, he invites us to understand the double sense of the cloud of witnesses. They are testimonies to God's faithfulness, which is an image of spectators in an arena, but they are also testifiers to us that God will do what he has promised that he will do. Some interpreters picture them watching from the stands. Others suggest that their lives testify to the faithfulness of God. I don't really care, because what it tells me is we're not alone. There's a cloud of people cheering us on. We run as part of an intergenerational family whose stories go all the way back to Adam and Eve. Wow. Maybe that doesn't make your mouth drop open, but it makes my mouth drop open. That this one great story of humanity, all the way back to the archetypal humans, I am tied into because of the grace and the mercy of Jesus Christ. In a church family like ours, with our ministries and our congregations and our generations, chapter 11 of Hebrews is not a museum gallery. It's our family album. Let me show you some photographs of the family. There's Samuel, and there's David, and there's Samson, and there's Sarah, and there's Abraham. They're my people. They're part of my family. They're in my family tree. And I am able to stand in the light of their witness and encourage you. Our family album, their faith fuels our faith. Their stories fuel our stories. And the implication is that your story can fuel mine. And my story can fuel yours. And the stories of the previous men and women in this house can fuel us. And if Jesus tarries, there will be other bright things sitting somewhere in 50 years, and your story can inspire them. We need to remember that story. Who has inspired you in your life of faith? I'm not talking about Abraham and David and Sarah. Who in recent memory has inspired you? If they're still alive, why don't you send them a card saying thank you? If they're still around in London, give them a ring and say, can I take you for a cup of coffee? Because you inspired me. You helped me. You spurred me on. Your word of encouragement kept me going when I was ready to fall. We far too often want everybody else to do that for us, but we can do that for someone else. We can inspire someone else by saying, I am a witness to your faithfulness. I saw your life in Jesus, and it helped me to live well. So let's get to 12, chapter 12. Oh gosh, it took me all that time to do a verse and a half. Let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race set before us. If I have spoken to you about the cloud that we stand amongst, now I want to talk to you about the race that we are called to run. When the writer says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us, he is making a distinction between weights, which are not necessarily sinful, but they slow us down, and sin, which entangles us. He uses a really rare Greek word in this sentence. Euperistatos. It doesn't matter if you don't know Greek, but that's the word, euperistatos. And it means something that wraps itself around your feet and causes you to trip up. Like a chain or a rope or a weed. It means ensnaring or clingy or dangerous. And the picture of something is of something coiling around your ankle so that you can't lift your foot off the ground. That is the sin that so easily entangles. What is this difference between weights that can slow us down and sin which can trip us up? Hebrews distinguishes morally between neutral hindrances and moral entanglements. Neutral hindrances are things that are not wrong in and of themselves. They just slow you down if you're not careful. A deep commitment to things can become an entanglement from a need to have a roof over your head. When you worry more about the stuff that you've got than the purpose that God has for you, you have allowed weights to become entanglements. When your family's opinion of you is more important than what God wants of you, your weight has become an entanglement. When you seek other people's approval over God's approval, your weight has become an entanglement. When the responsibility to keep a family together makes you make decisions that puts God at the bottom of your agenda, your weight has become an entanglement. That's one of the reasons that Paul encourages us to make sure that where we are able to make these decisions, we marry those that agree with our ethos and our values and our faith rather than outside of it. Because immediately we do that, we become entangled by other people's opinions and requirements, and they are very hard to get out of. What is heavy in your life but not holy? You see, some of our burdens, according to Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, can be carried, but some need to be dropped. Can I give you an example, in case it sounds confusing? Some years ago, and I may have used this story before, I was the pastor of a church in an area where children were schooled from the age of 4 for an 11+ examination to get them into grammar school. And the families in the area had their children learning Mandarin from 4 or 5 years of age. And they would go to ballet lessons and horse riding lessons. And you name it, they did it. And the kids' weekends were packed with all of this stuff. Nothing wrong with that stuff. Nothing wrong with it at all, right? Who doesn't want their daughter or their son to be good at ballet? Who doesn't want their children to succeed? I want my children to succeed. But one Sunday morning, one child who had been schooled from the age of 4 for the 11+, that week they all got their results, and the girl failed her examination. And on the way out, her mother said to me, "Can you tell her what a disappointment she is?" And I said, "Why would you want me to do that?" And she said, "Because we have been investing in her since she was 4. The little girl was standing there. We have spent thousands of pounds in her examinations. We've taken her to ballet classes. We've given this girl," and she was there, "we have given her everything we could so that she could fit in with her friends. And she has disappointed us by failing the 11+. And I said, "Do you want me to speak to your daughter now?" Now, some of you will be horrified by what I said to the little girl. She said, "Yes." I said, "No problem." So I got down on my knees and I said, "Darling, could you look at me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "You're not a disappointment to God. You are not a disappointment to God. God loves you. And he has a plan and he has a purpose for your life." The mother was not very happy. So she came in to see me the following week. And I wasn't doing it to upset her. She asked me to say something. It's not my fault. And she sat across the desk from me and she said, "You have no idea how hard it is to be a parent." And I said, "Well, I do. I have 4 children." And she said, this is what our weekends look like. Ballet, and she listed all of these things that the kids had to go to on a Saturday. And she said, "On top of all of that, you want me to bring my children to church on a Sunday. What kind of expectation is that?" she said. And I said to her, "Did you ever consider dropping some of the stuff on Saturday?" And she looked at me horrified. "What do you mean?" she said. I said, "Do you think that maybe what your kids need is to be brought up in the way of faith and to see that Jesus is the most important person in their lives? And if you have to make a choice between all of the clubs that they go to and them knowing and loving Jesus, put Jesus at the top of the list." That's when weights that easily entangle. I had a conversation with a man about 7 years ago, and he said to me, "I can't serve Jesus in the way that you say the Bible describes me serving Jesus," which was giving him our lives. And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I have a mortgage for a 7-bedroom house that I have to pay." And I said, "How many of you live in the house?" And he said, my wife and I and 2 children. And I said, is it possible that you could buy a smaller house and lead a more fulfilled life? He said, what do you mean? And I said, could you move to a 3 or a 4 bedroom house in the same area and reduce your mortgage and have time to put God at the center of your life? He said, why would God ask me to do that? And I said, because the deceitfulness of riches can blur your vision. It's a weight. There's nothing wrong with a 7 bedroom house. There's nothing wrong with your children going to all those clubs. But there is something wrong when that becomes more important than Jesus. That's the point that the writer of Hebrews is making. That we need to make sure that we lay aside the things that we don't need. That we are cut free from the clinging snares that wrap themselves around our ankles in the name of keeping up with the Joneses, or fitting in, or being as successful or more successful than someone else. That's a weight and a sin that will slow us down. What do you need to lay down? What are the weights and the sins that can wrap themselves around you or around me? But then he says, and run with endurance the race. The word for endurance here is hypomone, and the word for race is actually quite hard to translate. It's the Greek word agon, and it is a demanding, long-term contest, not a marathon, it's more than that, that requires endurance. And the writer of Hebrews reaches into Greek and Roman athletic imagery to help us understand what he's talking about. And his aim is to stir moral courage in us. We are to find endurance to stay in the fight, to give it our best and allow God to strengthen us. And it is only possible, he says, with singular focus. If we dilute our focus, we dilute our strength. If we dilute our purpose, we dilute our ability. If we get confused about what a successful life looks like, we will end up aiming for the wrong successful life. The race that is set before us. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Not the race you choose. The race that is set before you. You run it well. You don't choose the course, you choose how you will run it. I didn't get to choose the course of my life. But I did get to choose how I would run the course of my life. I have a friend, his name is Pip, and he's a minister. And he would often, please understand this in the right way, I'm not bragging, I'm just trying to be honest with you. He would often say to me, he worked with me for many years, Malcolm, many people want your platform, but they don't want your journey to it. You want my platform? Then you have to be willing to walk my journey. I didn't choose that course, but I do get to choose how I run it. So you can't choose your course, you can choose how you run it. And when you choose to run it well, it means I will stay focused on this. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were asking me about advice for ministry requests because they were being asked to do some things, and they said, I'm trying to fit it all in, but I've got a young family. I said, say no. And they said, what do you mean? I said, my wife and I had 4 children who were under 5. So for 10 years, when I was asked to go abroad for ministry, I said no. And people would say to me, why are you saying no? And I said, because my family needs me. And once somebody asked me to go to New Zealand to speak at a very, very, very big conference, and I said, I can't come. And they said, why? I said, I have another commitment. And they got a bit annoyed with me. They said, I will never invite you again if you don't say no now, if you don't say yes now. I said, okay, well, you'll never invite me again. He said, what could be more important than coming to speak at this? I said, putting my kids to bed. Because I made a priority of putting my kids to bed and of reading them a bedtime story and of praying with them. I made a priority of making silly tents in our living room to explain to them the life of Moses and filling sand pits with water to help them cross the Red Sea. Instead of being on the other side of the world preaching and teaching to thousands, I was in the back garden making the walls of Jericho with old shoeboxes so that we could kick them down and declare and teach my children the victory of God. Because that's not your job. That's my job. That's my job. My job is to teach my kids the way of the Lord. You can help, but it's not your job. And sometimes we have to make decisions based on the direction of our lives. And that's what it means to run your race well. And when you do it, it yields comfort. God knows the route that he has you to take. And he knows the calling that you are called to walk in. He knows the lane that you have been given. He knows the shoes that you need. What he wants you to do is run the race well. Where do you sense that the Spirit is saying to you, that's a weight? Lay it down. This is a race that you don't need to run. You don't need to run that comparison race. You don't need to run that identity race. You don't need to run that affirmation race. You don't need that person's affirmation more than you need mine. They may be annoyed at you, but you'll live with it. Just listen for my voice, daughter. Listen for my voice, son. Let me help you finish the race well. It sounds hard, and it is, but it is also very freeing. It liberates you from comparison and competitiveness that can both be very unhealthy. And thirdly, not only the race, the cloud that surrounds us and the race that we run, I told you I wanted to talk to you about the Christ that we are called to see. Verse 2 of chapter 12, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross and disregarded its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. This single sentence is the heart of this exhortation. It is the jewel in the bedazzling crown of Hebrews 11 and 12. And there are three movements in it. Movement 1, fix your eyes on Jesus. Aphorontes eis in Greek. Give him undivided attention. The verb means to look away to or to fix one's gaze. This is not fixing your gaze. Claudette is going to feel very awkward now. This is fixing your gaze. This is fixing your gaze. That no matter where I am, and sorry it feels a bit awkward, Claudia. Jesus is not awkward when I look at him like this. This is fixing your gaze. Fix your gaze on him. Don't glance at him. Don't look at him from time to time. Fix your gaze on him. And the more you fix your gaze on him, the more you will love him. And the more you see him, the more you will be enthralled by him. And the more you see him, the less you will want to look at other people. Because when you fix your eyes on Jesus, you are fixing your eyes on the most compelling face that the world has ever known. I will not have another focal point. I will not have another destination. I will not look for someone else's eyes. Fix your eyes on Jesus. The race that your life is won by long distance obedience in a Jesus direction. every day, every week, every month, until your last breath, I will fix my gaze on him. And what you discover when you do that, which I can't explain to you, but you can probably hear the emotion in my voice, is that when you fix your gaze on him, you realize that he has fixed his gaze on you. And he sees everything. He's not distracted by wars. He's not preoccupied by global conflict. Jesus Christ at this very moment has his eyes fixed on me and on you. That's why Ezekiel describes God as a many-eyed wheel. Because we think he only has one eye. He has eyes for you. He is keeping his eye on you. He's not looking at someone else. Is he not? No, he is. He's looking at them too. He's looking at Ben Bostina. He's looking at Lilies McGovern. He's looking at Adan and Conchita Cueva. He's looking at Malcolm Duncan. He's looking at you, and he's not going to get distracted. So as we fix our gaze on him, we realize that he has fixed his gaze on us. Movement number one, fix your eyes. Movement number two, on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter, or the author and the finisher, or the first and the last, or the beginning and the end. None of those do these words justice. And I very rarely do this, but I am suggesting to you that there are some words in Hebrews chapter 12 that you should just learn what they mean and keep them in Greek. Honestly, I really believe that. So the race, don't translate it as a race. Translate it as the agon, A-G-O-N. And if somebody says to you, what is this race? Say, I can't explain it. It's a fight, and it's a race, and it's a battle, and it's an endurance course, and it's an assault course, and it is a series of challenges. There isn't a single word to describe it. It's the agon. And Jesus, as the author or the pioneer, the Greek word is archegos, A-R-C-H-E-G-O-S. It doesn't mean author, just. It does mean that, but it means more than that. It doesn't mean pioneer. It means more than that. It means the source and the trailblazer and the champion and the leader and the general and the initiator and the idea and the one who stands at the center of all things and the reason and the logic and the concept. All of that in one word. Fix your eyes on Jesus, because he's the one that knows what he's doing in your life, in world history. There isn't a word to translate archegos. He is the model that we follow. He is the archetypal, he is the typical human that we live after. He is the moral example. He is the spiritual supremo. He is the physical pioneer. He is the hero. He is the champion. He is the star of the show. He is the name in lights. He is the one that can hold it all together. There isn't anyone else. There's only him. There's only him. It's not a pastor or a leader or a prophet or a church or a denomination or a stream or a pope or a cardinal or a bishop or an archbishop or an apostle. There's only him. He is the he is the archegos. He is the very source of the idea of what it means to succeed. And the same is true for the perfecter, the teleoites of faith. He is not only the one who goes first and leads many sons and daughters to glory. He is not only the founding leader. He is not only that. He is also the one who knows how to do it. He is the goal, the completion. This is a very unusual term that says Jesus not only begins our faith, he brings it to its intended maturity. This is a completion word. This is a satisfaction word. This is an accomplishment word. This is the word that means he is the one that holds it all together, and he is the one that brings it all together. You can have the yes of everybody else on planet Earth that has ever lived. And if you don't have his yes, you haven't succeeded. Conversely, you can have the no of everybody else on planet Earth, but if you have his yes, you are a champion. It is his single solitary right to determine if you and I have lived well. Oh my goodness. He is our sufficiency. Do you remember again the context in which this is written? In Hebrews 8, God has written his law in our hearts. In Hebrews 12, we will be promised that he will strengthen weary knees. The Pentecostal scholar Gowes writes about this and says that this is not some kind of grim, I have to endure it until the end of the story. This is God saying, I've got you. And everybody could have a verdict against you. But if his verdict is for you, his one voice out-trumps everyone else's. Remember where he's writing to. To Christians who might well die in the next few months. Because the verdict of the people that are watching them is, you're not worth it. You haven't succeeded. We don't want you. So even as those words and those voices are echoing around them, this writer says, but that's not the voice to listen to. The voice that you listen to is Jesus, who says, I want you. I see you. I will carry you across that finish line. And if you die with nothing, if you are defeated and attacked and criticized by everyone else, I have my eyes on you. So keep your eyes on me, daughter. Keep your eyes on me, son. Because I'll get you across the finish line. And if you've fallen, get up again. And if you've run out of energy, I'll give it to you. And if you're confused, I will give you guidance. And if you feel alone, I'm here. We haven't even got to look at for the joy set before him.